Hey guys, welcome to the channel, and this is a new build series that I'm doing called the Decade Build Series. Really original name, but basically the idea of it is to explore the popular styles of each decade, one wealthy house and one, on the meager side of things. So today is the Queen Anne style, which was popular in 1880 through 1910. And as with any Victorian era architecture, Queen Anne is basically showcasing sculptural shapes, ornamentation on the roofs and on the facade, and the houses were typically made of wood. So they really valued being eclectic. They loved asymmetry, contrast. They were excessive in everything they did. Typically in Victorian style architecture, they loved to include towers. The windows were embellished, often with stained glass and curved glass. Usually a single-story wraparound porch was essential to the Queen Anne style home. And so basically this is your typical Victorian era styled home. And so I wanted to show you some different examples of decorating in this era, which I've pictured here. So this is a interior of the living room, and sorry for the poor quality. These are old pictures. And this is a office. So just wanted to show you a little background so that way you know what I'm building, or at least trying to build. So now we're going up to the second floor, and I wanted it to have quite a few bedrooms just in case the family decides to have more kids, which was pretty common back then. There was no birth control, obviously, so and up here is going to be the office, as well as it's more of a study really, because it has some skill building items in there, and the master bedroom, the master bathroom, as well as I think there's another bedroom up here too, with 2 double beds. But yeah, so running water was actually a thing in the 1890s, but it was mostly for the wealthy or the well-to-do. I believe the first toilet, in the house, happened in the mid-1800s, so it was a fairly new thing still. So that's why I included bathrooms inside. There was, however, no showers. I did look up a few pictures of Victorian bathrooms that were inside the house, and they all had a bathtub, a sink, and a toilet. So beside the bathtub was often a basin, because what they would do is fill up the tub, and then they would just kind of use the basin to wash their hair or their body or whatever. And typically a maid or a servant would help whoever is taking a bath. I ended up changing the roof on the little tower there because it was looking kind of weird, so you'll see that changed later. And I had some trouble with the roof only because some of the house is irregular. It ended up being a lot bigger than I wanted it to be originally, but I couldn't include everything I wanted to in just a small house. So, yeah, I decided to make a more wealthy family And next week, I'm going to be building a house that's more of a farmhouse. So, a less wealthy family that has a farm and lives in the country. And yeah, so that's exciting. I'm also going to have a CAS video of the family that lives in this house. And at the end of the video, I'm going to be doing little machinimas just to show off the house because honestly, I don't know. I was getting tired of just seeing screenshots at the end. And yeah, so I hope you enjoy that. And now I'm just putting some spindles on top of the roof because that was one of the characteristics of a Victorian home. They were very decorative as far as what was on the house. The exterior of the house was very ornamental and there was a ton of detail. So I tried to kind of show that by using a ton of those little roof decorations. So now I'm just putting some windows all the way around the house, and they were typically more ornamental or had more decoration around the window in the front of the house, so it looked more grand, I guess. And oh, I found this really amazing CC. I don't think that you'll see it while I'm decorating the inside of the house, but I found a record player, and it had one of those big golden cones. They were called a gramophone. So basically, they have like a music box on the inside that you would wind, and then the giant cone would amplify the music. And yeah, so that was around in the 1800s, well, late 1800s. So you'll see that in the little machinima at the end. So here I was just changing the color of the roof because I wanted it to have that scallop shingled look as well as, have the trim all the way around. So now I'm just putting some greenery. They were a big fan of gardens, and this is kind of a smaller lot. So I'm thinking maybe in the spring I'll re-upload this house to the gallery and add a whole bunch of flowers and a little garden in the front or in the back. So moving on to the inside, typically in Victorian homes there's always a foyer or a hallway that would branch out into a sitting room in the front of the house. So that's what I was doing here. I was making a stairway up to the second floor as well as a little hallway that will branch out into like a parlor on the left, and that's where guests would sit and wait for dinner, or they would just have a chat with the lady of the house and have some tea. And sometimes in wealthier homes, they would actually have a sitting room specifically for the men and specifically for the women. And even though I imagine this family to be more on the wealthier side, I don't think they would be necessarily super rich or anything. So there's just one parlor sitting area up here in the front. Decorating this house was a little challenging, I'm not gonna lie, only because a lot of times in Victorian homes they were super into collecting like artwork, statues, things that were foreign from other countries. And yeah, so I tried to make the house look a little cluttered and just full of things that they might consider beautiful. There's a bunch of artwork everywhere. And yeah, so that's what I did as far as the decoration goes for the house. So now we're doing the kitchen, and from what I could tell from my research, they actually had, well, up until the to say the 1930s or the 40s, they started using gas stoves. But up until then, it was wood-fired stoves. And so I wanted to make the stove area look like it was a giant wood fire stove. And the only way I could think of to do that was to take one of the range hoods that would normally go on top of the stove and size it up so it looked more like the top of this giant stove. And I used these half walls and made them brick, because I wanted it to look like it was just part of the stove. I did find a custom content stove that was historically accurate, but I wanted you guys to be able to download this if you want it more easily. So really I just have the snow mod and the little record player that I put later post recording. And yeah, so in the kitchen, normally this is where the servants or the maids would cook everything for the family, and this is where they would eat. Normally the family would eat in the formal dining room. So this area is kind of blocked off and specifically for the servants, so I wanted it to look a little more drab and not as ornate as the rest of the house. I also ended up putting some counters in the kitchen because I completely forgot about the counters. And when I was creating the machinima, I was trying to get the maid to cook something for the family, and they were like, hey, there's no counters to make the food on. So I put those in after I recorded this as well. So you shouldn't have any problems creating food. I tested out the stove as well, and that works. So what I'm making now is the formal dining room, and this is where the family would entertain guests as well as have their family meals. So I wanted to include a piano in this room as well as a bar, since there's no study for the men specifically. I also noticed in my research that in the dining room and also in the living rooms, there would always be extra chairs just kind of along the wall. And maybe that was because, in case they needed extra chairs and they had more company than they thought they would have over, then they would have those extra chairs ready to go. So there's chairs everywhere, really. So this room back here is a bedroom, and it can be used for if you have another kid or something, but for my purposes, this room is the maid's room, and it's pretty fancy for a maid, I think. I wanted to create a 4-poster bed. A lot of the beds in the Victorian era had these fancy curtains that would come down from the posts, and they looked a lot like this actually. So yeah, I wanted to do something that looked similar to that. I think I also put a vanity in this room, and there's also vanities in the bathrooms because why not? This room is a guest bathroom, and it's pretty big for a guest bathroom, but I did notice in the pictures that I referenced for the bathrooms, they always had really ornate tiles, sometimes on the walls as well, but I found this really pretty one that had green paint with like a flowery tile, and yeah, so I thought that was really pretty for a bathroom, especially for a guest bathroom. Here I'm just changing the orientation of the bathroom a little bit. Since the tubs weren't really connected to anything per se, they kind of just went anywhere. They weren't really specifically on, next to a wall. Sometimes they were catty cornered. So I like the idea of that. Made it a little different. So moving on to the upstairs, this here is the library, study, office area. And here I believe there's a chess table, there's a easel, and there's a ton of bookcases and also a desk. So yeah, this is kind of, the skill building room, and this is where I imagine the father would come to relax and get away from the stresses of providing for his little family. Also, in my research, I found that most desks in a study or an office were placed close to a fireplace. And if you remember from the picture that I showed you guys before, which was the case as well, and I assume it's because if, they were working late or whatever, they would want to keep warm since there was no heat in the house besides the fireplaces, which is why I put a ton of fireplaces. I think there's one in every room pretty much. Moving on to the master bedroom, I wanted it to be very grand since this is the master, so I chose one of the more ornate beds as well as a fancy a fancy carpet, and later on I'll put drapery over the bed so it just looks that much more grand. Since that was a thing, there was so much drapery in this time period. So now I'm working on the master bathroom. It's pretty similar to the one that's downstairs as far as having the bathtub be more catty cornered, and I believe it's underneath the bay window there. There it is. There's the fancy bathtub with a little basin next to it so that they can use that to wash their hair or their body. I thought that was a really nice place for the bathtub because you have all the windows surrounding you or your sim. So I was undecided about what I wanted to do with this room, so I decided to make it into a children's room, and I imagined that this family has 2 little girls. So I put some rose wallpaper on the walls and had the little Victorian doll house for them to play. And I thought this room turned out really cute. This is probably one of my favorite rooms in the house, besides the study library area. Yeah, there they are. So this room is kind of like the blue room, I guess. That's what I had envisioned for it. Just adding some more little details to the kitchen. And yeah, so that's pretty much the entire build. I hope you all enjoy it. And if you want to download this house, it is available in the gallery. Make sure you have the little checkbox to see custom content in order to see it. My @name is IrrelephantSims. And yeah, I hope you liked it. And I'll see you all in the next part. Bye!